hello again. Today we are going to be looking at GitHub Actions for Unity games. Now, I did a video previously for GitLab, but I'm aware that lots of people use GitHub for their version control, and so I wanted to do basically the same thing in GitHub and show you how you can automatically run tests on your games, build them to various target platforms, and also deploy them. So without further ado, I'm going to draw some attention to the Game CI documentation. So Game CI is a community of people who have built some tools for us to use, both for GitLab, GitHub, other continuous integration platforms, and everything that I'll be showing you today I've learned by reading through their documentation. So you don't need this video, you can just do it by yourself by reading really high quality stuff, lots of examples. And while I'm talking of examples, there are not one, but there's two Unity projects that you can look at for inspiration for this. One is the Unity Actions, which I quote is the fastest and easiest way to automatically test and build any Unity project. So you can have a look at this one. And also there's a Unity reference project by Webertaken, who is very active on their Discord community if you have any questions. I've personally looked at these and then built my own workflow, which I'm going to show today. But before I do that, here is the game we are going to be testing and deploying and building today. So there is a 2D roguelike. It's off the Unity Learn platform. It's quite an old game, a very simple game, but I remember it being one of the first tutorials I did when I first started doing video games, and so for the nostalgia I thought we could look at this one today. So if I open up Unity, you can see I've already got the game downloaded, and if I hit play, here we go. It's a very simple roguelike 2D tile based. There's some music, there's even some AI. But yeah, we're not going to be doing much with the game. It's purely a way of showing that everything is working. So I'm actually going to close Unity now because there's nothing else we need to do in here. And I'm going to go to the folder where I've got my game stored. I've called it Rogue CI. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a new GitHub repository. Right, and I'm going to call this Rogue CI. A simple CI workflow for Unity. I'm going to leave it as public. I'm going to leave the other settings and just create it. Looking back at my notes, what we are firstly going to do is we're going to create a new Git repository and add our files to it. So here are our files. I'm going to create a new Git repository and show you that there are lots of untracked files here. So this is basically all of our game files and also a bunch of caches and library files and all the things that Unity builds when you load the editor up. We don't actually need quite a lot of this, and to keep the repository nice and lightweight, we're going to get a gitignore file. Now there's a great service for getting gitignore files called gitignore.io. And we can actually tell this we want a Unity project, and it will create us a gitignore file for our Unity project. Isn't that nice? So now I'm going to download that file, and I'm going to name it .gitignore. And now if I show you my folder, the folder structure is all still exactly the same as it was before, but we can only see a couple of things in Git. And this is all that we need to actually build the game. So we're going to add those files and see there's quite a lot there. We are going to commit them. And we're going to say added game files. And you can see we've got our first commit. Now we're going to link this up to our repo using this remote add command here. And we can now push our master branch. Great. And now that that's done, we can now refresh our project and we can see our files have been uploaded. And if we go to the Actions tab, there's nothing going on here because we have not told GitHub that we wanted to do anything. All we've done is stored some code. So I'm going to link to this README file in the description. And this is a project that I've been working on. So if I go and have a look at the code here, you can see most of the files are exactly the same as what we've just been working on, but I've got these files in here in GitHub workflows. And we are going to be interested in two of these. We want the template and we want the activation. So actually, I'm going to show you these one at a time. So let's start off with the activation file. This is what a GitHub workflow looks like. So we've got a name, we've got an on, and we've got some jobs. The on is basically saying, when do we want this to run? And I've got it on a workflow dispatch event, which basically means this is not actually going to run automatically. This is just going to run when I call it to run. And the title is Get Unity License Activation File. And the reason for that is the first thing that we need to do is we want to generate a license. The reason we want to generate a license is because Unity needs to know who is making this game and whether or not they are allowed to make this game. So we are going to generate a license, store it in GitHub so that we can build these games and Unity can know who's building the game and that we are doing everything by the books and legally. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to create a new directory structure, and it's going to be called .github and then the .github workflows. I think that's the right one. Yeah, workflows. And then inside this directory, we are going to create a file. We're going to call it activation YAML. You can call it whatever you want, but that's what I'm going to call this one. And we're going to just copy and paste everything from this file. Save it. And then while we're doing this, we might as well get the next file as well, which I've called template. And again, I'm just going to copy everything in here. Save it. So I'm going to do a git add. And you can see we've got our new files. I'm going to commit and call it added workflows. Just going to push that back up. And now you can see we've updated the files. And if I go to the Actions tab, we've got this workflow run here for our added workflows commit. And you can see we've got a workflow failed next to this. Now the reason is we are running the check the Unity license, and that has failed because we don't have a license. So what we want to do is we want to generate a license. So you can see we had our activation YAML, and it's not triggered it, it's not run it, but we can, because it's a dispatch, a workflow dispatch event trigger, we can run it manually. So that's now going to run manually. And what this is going to do is we are going to, first of all, check out our files. Very important. We are going to run WebRTaken's request manual activation file action. and then we're going to upload the resulting file. For more information on this, we can have a look at the documentation, and it can show you an example of an activation file, and we are going to manually run the workflow, and we're going to visit this page, license.unity3d. I've also got it linked in the notes here, and this is where we're going to upload our license file. Okay, everything has run through. We have passed the workflow. So now we can go back to the workflow summary. We can see it's all green, and we've got this artifact down here for the manual activation file. An artifact is basically any time your workflow creates an output that you want to store, we save that to a zip file, and we can download that. So download that now. We are going to extract it. And what we can see here is we have a Unity ALF file. That's the file we want. So we're going to go back and we are going to go to our manual activation. We are going to get our activation file. We're going to say we want a personal license, and our company is going to earn less than $1,000, well, less than $100,000 in gross revenue. And now we're going to download the license they give us. Now, this license is something that you want to keep to yourself. You don't want to share this, you want this publicly available, because this license basically says, I am me, and I am allowed to build Unity games. You don't want anybody else working with your license. And this is where secrets come into the equation. So if we go to our settings and look at secrets, it will tell us that secrets are environment variables that are encrypted. And this basically means that we can store information in our workflow and access it without it being visible to anyone else or accessible, or just it's kept safe. So we're going to create a new secret, and if I check my notes, it's going to be called Unity License. Okay, so I've just copied the contents of my Unity ULF file into this secrets key. It's quite a long file, but it doesn't really matter. Now that we've got our license stored, we can go back to our Game CI template, which is our template YAML, as we spoke about earlier, and this one failed when we last uploaded it. And the reason it failed is because it did this check for Unity license, and we didn't have a license. Now I'm going to rerun all jobs. There we go. Which means it is now recognized that we have a license. Now, this step is basically unnecessary for your workflows. So when you are building your workflows, you will not have a check for license thing, because you just need to save your license once and then you can just forget about it. It's not necessary for your workflow. I just wanted to demonstrate that you can do that. Right, so we are actually going to go back now, and we are going to open template YAML. Right, and you can see here the first job is check license. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is we are going to customize our workflow to run tests. And running tests is super helpful if you want to make sure that changes to your game haven't broken anything. You might be working on one area of the game, you don't want to make sure that those changes break anything you've already built. So having test coverage is a good thing, and especially when you're collaborating, you want to know when other people make changes to their game, or when you make changes to the game, you don't have to test every single aspect of it. You can just rely that everything is working. And so I've got a test runner here, which I'm just going to uncomment. Now, if you look at my test runner, you can see here that it needs the check license job, which is this one up at the top here. So that basically means that if this job fails, this one will not run. And just to demonstrate that, I'm just going to quickly make those changes, commit them, added test runner. If we look at our workflows again, at our actions, you can see I've just pushed a new commit and it's running the CI template. And since I've made changes, it's now got this new test all modes test runner, which is running because I have a Unity license and that first one passed. But at the same time, we do not need the check license anymore, and we're actually going to get rid of that. Now, the test runner tests all modes. There are two different modes that you can test. There are edit mode tests and play mode tests. And that basically boils down to they are tests that run without actually playing the game. So just looking at scripts and testing logic. And there are play mode tests which actually run a scene or run a game, so you can test things like physics and movement and animation. And what this test runner does is it tests all test modes. So you could choose to only have play mode tests, or you can only have edit mode tests, but I find it's more efficient to just run them both at one point. So even if you're not, if your game doesn't have any play mode tests, you might want to choose to set your pipeline up to check both of them, just so that if you add them in the future, you don't have to go back and edit your workflow. You can just leave it and it will still work. And if we look through this, what this is doing is, first of all, as always, it's checking out our code. It's then doing a couple of things with GitHub's large file system. And what it's basically doing is it's caching any large files, so that every time you run this, you don't have to wait for GitHub to download all of these large files from your project. And that just speeds up the tests. So we're going to skip all the LFS stuff. The next thing we're doing is we're caching your library, which is just meaning we're caching all of the Unity editor files, so to speed up the build. And now we get to the one that we actually care about. We get to our test runner. And this is using the WebAttack and Unity test runner, and we're testing all test modes. And then afterwards, we are doing our upload artifact action to just upload the results, so that if there are any failures, you can have a look at what's gone wrong and what's broken. Great, that's run through now, and we've come back green. No failures in the testing, and we've updated our caches, so that should run much faster in future. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to actually build our games. You might not even have any tests, you might even not want to run any tests. That's not interesting to you. You just want to build your game and have GitHub take care of that for you. So again, we're going to edit our template. So, and I've got a build WebGL job, and I've got a build Windows job, and I've got a build Android job. Let me just uncomment those. There. So we can see, I'm just going to talk through the WebGL, but all three of these jobs are basically the same. So the WebGL build, what we're going to do is we've given it a name. It runs on Ubuntu latest. I've told it that it needs the test runner. And the reason I've done this is because I actually don't want to waste the time building games if I know that they've broken. So if there's something happened that my tests aren't running, I actually don't want the build to work at all. I only wanted to build my game if the tests are passing. But for your needs, you might just take that out and always build. Entirely up to you. What we are doing here, again, we are checking out our code and dealing with our large file system caches. And then here it gets interesting. We are using the WebAttack and Unity builder, and we're building for the target platform WebGL. And then finally, we are uploading our artifact, and we're calling it build WebGL, and the Unity builder puts it in the folder path build WebGL. And the same thing for Windows almost entirely, except with the difference being that our platform is standalone Windows 64, our build is standalone Windows, and our path is standalone Windows. And similarly for Android, our target platform is Android, and our build is an Android. So we're just going to make those changes, commit, added builds for some targets, and push those up. Our commit has been received and it started to build. And you can see from the workflow, we're still going to run all of our tests first, but then we've got here the separate jobs for Android, WebGL, and Windows. Now, while those are running, so if we have a look in the documentation at our builder, it tells us what the builder is, how it works, some basic information on how to set it up. But importantly, what we care about is the target platform key, this one right here. And it must be one of the allowed values listed in the Unity scripting manual. And basically, Unity defines all of the build targets that are available with these names. So you can use these names in your build pipeline as well. We've got our standalone Windows, Android, standalone Windows 64, WebGL, whichever ones you want. But I just wanted to show you the last step of what we will be working on, which is how to actually deploy your games. Having your version control build your games is really convenient because at any point you can download the latest version of your game and send it to people to playtest and all of that jazz. But what's even more cool is when you can automatically deploy changes of your game to certain platforms. So you could deploy to the Android Play Store, you could deploy to Steam, you could deploy to itch.io, and make sure that without having to put any extra effort in, the latest version of your game is always available on these different platforms. Now, for this demonstration, I'm just going to build to GitHub Pages with a WebGL build. And the reason why that is cool is because it means that not only can you always download the latest version of your game, you can actually play the latest version of your game anywhere, anytime, without having to install it or download any files. And to do that is actually very simple. All we're going to do is check out our code, and we're actually going to download an artifact. And this is one time where we actually do need this needs key here, because we need the build WebGL. If we haven't built the WebGL, then we can't deploy it. So we need this right here. And then what we want to do is we want to download the artifact that we created in that build. So we can see here in the build WebGL, we are uploading an artifact and we've called it build WebGL. And so we are going to download that same build WebGL and we're going to put it in the build directory. Then we are going to use this GitHub Pages deploy action that I found, and we're going to tell it we want to deploy this folder, build WebGL, to this branch. And the branch could be anything. I think the GH Pages is just the default branch that lots of people use for GitHub Pages, but it could be anything. Because later in GitHub, you're going to actually tell it which branch to deploy to the pages. So if I just save this, and commit added deployment to GitHub Pages. But if we go into Actions, we can see that actually now we've got a much more complicated workflow. We've got our build for WebGL, which we're deploying, and we've got our build for Android and Windows. And you can see here that our first set of builds is finished, but we actually had an error building for Android. And I've had a look through the error logs, and I found that there is a problem because it's not been set up correctly. That's probably just to do with the fact that it's a very old game. But the player settings package name needs to be of the format com.yourcompanyname.yourproductname. And to fix that, I'm going to go into the build settings, the player settings. I'm going to look at Android. I think it's in other settings. Override the package name. Put that in there. Close and save. And if we add that, going to call this fixed Android error. And it's already showing us how test coverage is good for making sure your games are complete. While we're waiting to see whether or not that has fixed the Android build, I think the Android build failed, but our deployment to GitHub Pages has worked successfully. So once that that job has run, we can go and we can see in our project, if we look at our branches, we've now got our GitHub Pages branch. We can see this is a WebGL build with our index file and the build settings. And if we look at the commits, we can even tell deploying GitHub Pages from added deployment to GitHub Pages. So we can see exactly which commit triggered the build. And then if we go into settings and pages, we can now set our GitHub Pages branch to be our GitHub Pages branch. Right, and so your site is ready to be published at yanniboy.github.io/rogueci. And so you can see we've actually got a working WebGL build. And the game is working. Isn't that great? And there we have it. After fixing that little issue with the Android build, we now have everything passing. We have our deployment to GitHub Pages working. We can download the various build files for Android and Windows, run those locally, and we'll always catch any issues introduced into our game and be able to play test it when there's no issues. So thank you for watching the video. Please do comment if you want any more information, or if you have any problems with your builds or questions. I'll also leave a link in the description to the Discord channel and the documentation for the Game CI people. And yeah, let me know if you want any other videos along the lines of deploying to Google Play for Android builds, or getting your games uploaded to Steam or itch.io. Just yeah, let me know and I'll make some more videos. Until then, take care. Bye.